Hey, glad to be back today. We took a little break, but it's time for Psalm 54. We're going to be diving in real quick. It's going to be a shorter video as we kind of ramp back up. But if you'll turn with me to Psalm 54, and we're going to see another psalm here of David. Now, remember, the first part of the second book of Psalms, there were a lot of different psalms by different people, the sons of Korah and things like that. But really, from here on out, in the second book of Psalms, we get mostly Psalms by King David. I think there's only a couple more that aren't. And so what's really cool about a lot of these Psalms in the second part of the Psalms is they line up with stories we see in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd in Kings, just the stories of David, right? And so when we read, especially the superscripts at the top, we're going to get a lot of information about what was going on. Okay, so I'm going to read this superscript, and then I'll explain what it's about, and then we'll go into the psalm. So to the choir master, with stringed instruments, a maskil of David, when the Ziphites went and told Saul, is not David hiding among us? Okay, now what's interesting here is first, the Ziphites are betraying David here, and we find this story actually twice. They do it twice. We find it in 1 Samuel chapter 23 in verse 19, and then beginning of 1 Samuel chapter 26 with verse 1, we see them going to Saul again to betray him. Now, what's really interesting here is that we can really kind of trace the Ziphites and their ancestors all the way up to Judas. And so when we see here is actually a foreshadowing of Judas betraying Jesus just the same way that his forefathers, his ancestors, and the Ziphites went to Saul and betrayed King David. Okay, so let's go ahead and read it, and then we'll talk about it. There's two parts, 1 through 3, and then 4 through 7, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so we'll start with verse 1. "O God, save me by your name, and vindicate me by your might. O God, hear my prayer. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me. Ruthless men seek my life. They do not set God before themselves. Selah. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life. He will return the evil to my enemies. In your faithfulness, put an end to them. With a freewill offering, I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies." Okay, so what we see here is verse 1 through 3. What we see here with the whole song is him kind of riding in the aftermath of being betrayed by the Ziphites. Okay, and so what he's talking about here is taking comfort in God. And again, we go back to this common theme of David where he takes comfort in the sovereignty of his God, right? Not in the circumstances that are around him, not in the things that are going on in his life. And again, so many times we read these Psalms and we see all kinds of emotion bubbling forth for King David, right? We see sadness, we see joy, we see excitement, we see all kinds of emotion. But his emotion never changes his thoughts on his God, right? And our emotions can be good to help ground us. They can be good to help steer us in the right direction for us or for our family. But when it comes to our relationship with God, our emotions really don't tell us a whole lot. They don't tell us really about who he is. And they don't tell us about what he's doing in our life, because a lot of times our emotions are based on our circumstances. They're based on the things we can see right in front of us, right? And what David does is David feels the emotion, right? We're allowed to feel that emotion. We're allowed to feel mad. We're allowed to be upset. We're allowed to feel sorrow because we've been betrayed by people here on this earth. But David takes that emotion and he doesn't allow that emotion to color his understanding of God, because his understanding of God is not an emotional understanding. It's a knowledge in his head and both in his heart, but a knowledge because of what God has done before, because he is his good shepherd, like we read in Psalm 23. And we have the same freedom to approach our God that way. We don't have to rely on what our feelings are telling us about the current moment. We can trust in what God has done and what we know God promises he will do, right? Now, verses 1 through 3 here, David's complaining about the malice of his enemies, obviously. They've been terrible to him. They've treated him terribly, and they have turned him into King Saul, who is now, trying to kill him. He's trying to hunt him down so he can eliminate him. And David prays for help against them, right? David takes that to God and says, hey, God, I need your help here. Oh, God, save me by your name and vindicate me by your might. Oh, God, hear my prayer. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me. Ruthless men seek my life. They do not set God before themselves. And there's times where there's things going on in our life where we may pray that same thing. Oh, God, save me by your name. Vindicate me by your might. Free me by your power, God. Bring me back into your family. Bring me back into your will, because either the world is trying to tear me down or things are going on inside of me in my own life where I'm falling away. God, save me by your name. Vindicate me by your might, not mine. And so we see David lifting that prayer to God. And then we see here David will comfort himself, right? Not with how he feels, because he's still sorrowful. He's still fearful for his life. He's still scared. He's still sad. He's probably still angry with what happens. But he comforts himself with the assurance of the divine favor and protection, right? Because he already knows that God's going to watch out for him. He places faith in that, and understanding that in due time, his enemies would be taken care of, not by his own hand, but by the hand of God. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life. He will return the evil to my enemies. In your faithfulness, put it into them. With a freewill offering, I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies. And I think if there's anything we can take out of this psalm today, it's this. Our life is not always going to go perfect. We know that. Our job situation is not always going to be perfect, right? Our family members and our loved ones are not always going to make decisions that we agree with or that put us in the best place to succeed. There are things in our life that are outside of our control that bring about waves of emotion upon us. We're about to have an election that could very well shake the faith of a lot of people. But we don't put our faith in politicians. We don't put our faith in ourselves. We definitely, certainly cannot put our faith and our feelings about God and what he's doing in this moment. We put our faith in the assurance of who he is and in the assurance of who we are in relation to him, that we are his child, that we have been redeemed not by our hand but by his, that God is our helper. He's the upholder of our life, and that God will deal with our enemies, and in his faithfulness he will put that to an end. And then we can turn to God and say, we're going to offer our worship to you. We're going to offer our praise to you. We're going to offer our lives as living sacrifices to whatever your will has for us, God. Whatever it is, to serve you. We'll give thanks to your name because we have assurance that you are who you say you are, and that you are going to watch out for us. You're going to take care of all our troubles and all of our issues, and that you are